Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode, what was this, 97?
97.
97.
We are three away. God,
Holy smokes. So,
darn.
nine, and I don't
I
even have a
can't
title
believe
for it.
it.
We're so deep into this that I don't even have a title for it anymore. I'm just like, we just have to insert some kind of a witty thing here. And I'm like, okay, that's exactly what it's going to be this week,
Yeah,
I
you
guess.
you you name the show this week.
Yes,
Anybody watching?
viewer's choice is what
That's
it
right.
is. So,
That's it.
so just a little bit of behind the scenes, I guess,
Mhm.
of Mirrorless Minutes, or at least for how I'm going to be doing things moving forward until I get a different solution. So I'm doing my webcam is now the EM1 Mark II, and doing the audio straight from the EM1 Mark II through a lavalier mic. And because of that, I've got a dual monitor setup, and I spaced the monitors apart and stuck the camera in between them. So there's going to be times when I'm not talking to you, at least you won't think I am, because I'm going to look over here at Mike on this display, or I might look over here at the chat window to see what you're talking about. But don't feel like I'm not paying attention to you if I'm not looking right here. So until I get my solution in place, there might be a little bit of this back and forth. I got to get with Joe Edelman and find out what his
Yeah,
secret is.
yeah, we're gonna find out how that is. I'd
So
like to see how Joe takes it on the road. See how he does it.
yeah. We're gonna pick his brain. The guy
Yeah,
is full of so much information. I mean, he's truly an inspiration for sure. And
yeah.
just a big shout out to Joe.
Oh,
Always a shout
well,
out to Joe. He's the man.
yeah.
So I talked a little bit about my setup. I'll tell you, I've got a lamp over here, and I've got a floor light over here, and I've got a LED strip light here. But I like your light better.
Yeah, my light is called California Sunshine,
Good
coming
grief.
in from the window in a hotel. As you can
Nice.
see, I've got with me is the EM1 Mark II and the 12 to 100 and my Insta 360 camera
There you go.
and my clothes inside inside my you know my darn luggage. So
Well,
that's the way it rolls.
I'm glad you packed close. And it's
Yeah,
always
I
nice.
did.
Makes a good impression. You're there for
Well,
work. So
at least I have a shirt. I'll leave
yep.
that one open as you're
So
drinking away.
right. So you're in California, and
Yeah.
obviously you've got a little bit of sunshine there to
Oh my
do your
gosh.
show
Yeah,
from. So
I'm
that's
in
good.
in the beautiful vacation town of Fresno, California, which no one ever said. Uh,
Right.
106 degrees.
Woo! Holy cow! Nice and cool here. So let's talk photography for a little
Yeah,
bit here. I think we've
exactly.
got people watching that might want to talk about that. And
Yeah, I think
even
so.
though I didn't give it a title to give you an idea of what we're going to talk about, we actually do kind of have a little bit of a game plan here. We're going to talk about some stuff we've got coming up over the next few weeks. Mike's going to talk about. He mentioned 360 a second ago. I have a
Mm-hmm.
feeling that that's going to come up, and then I'm going to talk about what I consider the unsung hero of Olympus camera technology, and that is live composite. So
Hmm.
I'll let you lead off with the 360 talk, because I'll tell you
Okay.
what, I can't talk anything about that really at all.
Oh, I don't know. You can, if you were forced to, you
A little
could.
bit.
You know that. Yeah. So between the last show and this show, and if you do any following of me on Facebook and stuff, you're gonna know I've been posting it 360 images now for a good part of the year, I guess, and I just got really involved with it. And one of the best cameras out there, at least in my opinion, and they haven't paid me anything to say it. I can tell you is the Insta 360. But in between then and there, they've asked me to come on and be an ambassador for them. Of course, first and foremost, that does not mean that I'm not shooting with Olympus. As you can tell, Olympus is right here. Yeah, that goes without saying. It doesn't even matter if I wasn't a visionary. I'd be shooting with Olympus. I mean, it's a foregone conclusion in my mind. I think you feel the same way. I mean, it's just what you have to shoot with if you're going to make it happen.
Right.
But yeah, so the Insta 360, they're out of yeah, it's crazy because they're like out of China and Japan and trying to talk, and everybody's hours are different when you talk with them. But I'll go around. I'll do some. I'll do a couple. A couple seminars and things for them. It won't be nearly as taxing. I think if Olympus is taxing, it takes more hours. Let's put it that way. But it should be fun. And one of the things that's really cool, I'm looking forward to, is see if I can make it happen, is get inside the Apple stores, because Apple sells the Insta 360. I guess it's over here, and they do workshops, and that would be fantastic to get inside and do some workshops inside an Apple store. Maybe some photo walks with 360. So I've been approaching. You have to approach each one individually. I didn't know that. I thought it might be like one person, but each one has a creative sort of director for all their classes.
Wow.
So I just been calling them up and saying, hey, do you want somebody to talk about this? Because they already have all kinds of photo classes that they're doing. I mean, most of them are, of course, with their iPhones.
Right.
I mean, they're not having anybody come in with an Olympus or DSLR, but they sell that camera. So we'll see how it goes. It's mirrorless. I can tell you that.
That's why it's on the show. That's why we're letting it.
That's right. That's why it gets talked about. It's some crazy fun, and it's a world of photography that, I mean, I think I can even explore it from the normal DSLR if I actually had some setups. A lot of guys do that 360 with regular mirrorless cameras or DSLRs too. Just stitching it all together inside Photoshop. So, hey, everything is something new, and something new is always fun. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. I'd like to see what people like Ron Pepper think of that.
Yeah, because he did a lot. He was doing a lot of that 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean he's doing it with like a nodal point.
He is, and that's
and he does a lot of real estate with it. So I'm kind of curious to see what somebody like he thinks about it. Actually, maybe you could do a 360 episode of Mirrorless Minutes and have Ron on. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, because I think that. He was really into it. And that was tough, I think, a couple of years ago, because he was just getting new stuff being put out there when he was trying that in Chicago and stuff. So we're doing that. We'll have fun. We'll do something this weekend. I know we've got something planned this weekend, right?
Right.
And gosh knows if Jamie and Mike are doing something, bring your umbrella. And no comments in the chat room either, Bob, about that.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. So for those who don't know what we're talking about, a little inside baseball here. Mike and I, over the course of the last several years, when we do events, it seems like we have a pretty good streak of getting rain during our workshops. And we used to try to blame it on Bob. And I don't think we can do that anymore. So anywho, we got a workshop. Not really a workshop. It's just a meetup, a free event that we're doing here in Michigan. So if anybody lives in Michigan that's watching this, or I'm going to say northern Indiana, northern Ohio, parts of Illinois, that wants to drive up and spend the night, we're going to do an afternoon of street shooting, architecture, just the city scene in the city of Grand Rapids. And then once we get towards evening a little bit later, we're going to break. We'll probably grab a bite to eat. There's definitely some good places to eat and get beer. Yeah. If you like beer, Grand Rapids is like king of beer. And then from there, we're going to move over to the lake shore. And I've got a really cool park picked out there where we'll do some more nature photography, and then end the day with a nice sunset on the shores of Lake Michigan. And it's a free event.
If
you're curious,
you can't go wrong.
No, you can't go wrong with free.
You get to shoot, man.
Yeah. And like I said, it's free, and it's turning out to be kind of a bigger event. I think we've got 15 or 20 people that are
last I checked, we had somebody signed up today. I saw. I know you might have one drop we talked about. But then one came in. It says 20 or 21, I think. Last check. So
it's pretty crazy. And bring your family, spouse, friend, partner, whatever, whoever. Everybody's invited. I know my wife's coming. Mike's wife's coming. So.
I was just gonna say, if you're interested in saying hello to my wife, I'm not too sure why you would be, but that's okay. I mean, she's probably watching this and getting mad at me right now. But you could complain with her if you have a spouse and you want to bring them. It's not always good if Jamie's wife and my wife get together, because they can complain together about us.
So Tim Hanko wants to know when it's going to happen. It's happening Saturday. So Tim, if you're curious, head over to meetup.com/mirrorless adventures. Right. And the details of the event are there. And I'll try to make sure that I get those posted on the show notes for this show on the YouTube channel and in the show description for the audio podcast. So if you're curious, it's a good place to check it out. It'll be fun. It's always fun to get around a bunch of crazy photographers, crazy like you and I and everybody else, and just have fun shooting. So.
And one thing you're going to be talking about too there, I know I'll talk a little bit about anybody that wants to talk about 360 stuff. Of course I'll do that, and Olympus, because we'll have ours, but you're going to have your filters and stuff there too.
That is
from
correct.
Neezy, right?
Yep. And last year I did a meetup on the shore of Lake Michigan. I can't even talk. And I had somebody drive 2.5 hours just to see the filters. So it shows you just kind of like how interested people are in those filters, and there's a good reason for it. You know, once you see them in action, you kind of understand why filters in this day and age actually still matter to photography.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I'll admit, 2.5, 3 years ago, I didn't think that was really the case, and now I'm completely sold on it. You know?
Oh yeah. Now, are you sure you're just being humble that they didn't drive 2.5 hours to see you? Or you just
okay. That would be awkward.
That's really commitment.
Okay. I'd hate to have to tell him, look, you know, I'm married, you know, but hey, it's cool, you know, I'm flattered.
Yeah, exactly.
But, so that's the event that we've got coming up there, and then part of the image share tonight will kind of lead into another event that's coming up that Mike is doing, and because we're about 10 minutes in, I think I'll start an image share now that we can go from my image share and segue into how it applies to what you've got coming up. So how about that?
Sounds great.
let me start this screen share here. And again, I apologize if I'm looking all over the place, you guys. It's just kind of how this works. Where's my cursor? There it is. All right. So the gist of all these images is going to be live composite, and I wanted to spend some time talking about not just the photos per se, but the techniques and the tips about live composite, because I do feel like it is an under advertised, under promoted, and oftentimes honestly underutilized feature in the Olympus cameras. And how this segues into Mike's going to be teaching you guys how to do live composite at another event that he's going to be putting on not too long from now. So I'll start off with this. This was from the workshop that Mike and I did in Atlanta the other month, and this is kind of typical of what I think I introduce people to live composite for. You know, this is kind of one of the easiest things to explain live composite with is, you know, a city scene at night, you know, with cars going through the scene and all that. And what I want to explain to people is how to initially just determine your base exposure for this. And I apologize if you can hear cars driving by, but I've got a window open and it's busy all of a sudden. So to set up a scene like this, though, first initially you just kind of want to survey it out, and you kind of want to get a feel for your composition. I know that there's a tree stuck in this frame, and I didn't really care at first. I just wanted this view of the city. So don't look at this from a compositional standpoint so much as just an example of how to set up the scene for your base exposure. Now, when you're using live composite, a lot of people always ask, you know, well, how do I know how to set up those interval settings on the camera? And I'll explain what those do and how to get to that point. The best, easiest way for me to explain this to people is get yourself set up, get yourself composed, get your camera to the ISO that you want to use initially, which I always start off with the base ISO of 200. Get your aperture set where you want it, you know, so you can maintain the depth of field that you're after, you know, if you want a deeper depth of field or shallower or what have you. Just get those settings set up on your camera in aperture priority. And once you've done that in aperture priority, if you look at your display, it's going to give you an exposure time of how long it would take to properly expose that scene, to give you, like, you know, a general exposure. So for example, for this scene, I think that the base exposure and aperture priority, or the exposure time, if you were, in aperture priority, was like 2.5 or 3 seconds. So I take note of that. We'll say 3 seconds. At that point, simply go over into manual mode, dial your exposure time down until you get into live composite, hit the menu button, and then change that where it says interval or whatever. It gives you a number of seconds. Set it to match what it was in aperture priority. So 3 seconds in this case. You're set. It's literally as simple as that. And then, you know, you hit the shutter button once, it gets your base exposure set, and then trigger the shutter the second time to enable the live composite and get the ball rolling. Now, I do that and I'll let it run for just a couple of seconds. I'll watch the exposure develop. And then if I don't like the way that the scene has been developed, if I want to, we'll say, brighten it up a little bit because aperture priority wasn't giving me the level of brightness that I want, or if aperture priority was giving me maybe a little too bright of a scene, you know, then you can start adjusting a couple of different settings to change the way that looks. You know, you could adjust ISO if you had to, you could adjust your aperture, or you could adjust that interval time. That interval time, I think, is just bad verbiage in the system. It's not so much an interval as it is setting the tone for that base exposure. Because I've done shots where I have the interval set at like 3 seconds like it was for this, and I've had it set where it's, you know, running for 30 seconds, and I don't see a difference in the way that the light that is recorded is displayed. And I hope that that makes sense. It's kind of a weird concept to put out there, but I know a lot of people say, well, if I'm doing star trails, you know, what exposure interval do I need it at? And it's funny because it doesn't really play a part so much in the stars as it does in the stuff that's in the foreground of the scene. So this barn, for example, I know this looks like daytime, but this is what happens when you shoot during a full moon. And it's funny because aperture priority told me to expose for that, you know, I needed, I think it was like 30 or 40 seconds, something like that. And it gave me a decent looking foreground. It wasn't like perfect or whatever. In this case, this is one of those things where I decided to jump in, and I stopped down and opened up the lens a little bit more. So this was shot with the 7-14, and I think initially I was at f4, so I just cut it down to f2.8, and that ended up letting in enough light to where I didn't have to tinker with any of the other settings to get this shot. So this
Jamie, I'm going to jump in too. That's
yeah.
That's a really good point. I think you're talking about that, using that aperture adjustment, because it's exactly the same thing I do with that. I mean, it makes so much more sense to just adjust it real quickly with the aperture instead of trying to find that, like you say, that interval time.
Right.
Because you don't. I mean, I've tried to adjust that interval time. And, you know, at times that I guess it'll work. You might be a little brighter on the streets if you're doing cars. But like when you're doing something like your barn, I think that aperture is enough.
Yep. And I always tell people too, I'll use the ISO as my last resort. The cameras are great at handling, you know, higher ISO now than they were, you know, a year or two ago. But still, I'm doing everything I can to get like the cleanest image possible out of camera, especially if you're doing something with stars. Noise reduction, you know, it could potentially wipe out a star or two if you're kind of heavy-handed with the noise reduction in software. Granted, it's not going to be so much on stars that are moving like this, but when you do in the center of the image have Polaris and some of these other stars that are tight towards that concentric center there that aren't rotating as much, you know, I worry about maybe wiping out a star or two with that. So ISO changes are the last thing I do. But yeah, like you said, you know, if you can tweak it with either the base interval setting, you know, or with your aperture, you know, if you can't go anything beyond like the 60 seconds that you've got with the base. And so this is, you know, the two most common cases, again, like I tell people, you know, that they can wrap their heads around, and I'll brief explanation for people who are watching who maybe don't know anything about live composite at all, because we actually had a couple of people, I think, in Atlanta who had never used it before, so I don't think we're really sure what the capabilities were. But for those watching who aren't sure about this, because I did invite people to watch who weren't Olympus shooters, what live composite allows you to do is run a scene like this. This scene ran for 30 or 40 seconds. It's not super long, but 30 or 40 second exposure with a standard DSLR, chances are, if you weren't stopped down to like f22 and maybe had a filter on it, it would just be totally overexposed. Live composite, for those not aware, allows you to set the base exposure, which for me was the city scene back here. I'm exposed for that. That's locked in. That is not going to overexpose. This could run for 3 hours, and these buildings were never overexposed. All what live composite does is it locks in that base exposure. Any changes in light in your scene, so cars driving through, stars moving through the sky, those changes are what are layered on top of that base exposure. So again, kind of like a basic idea of what live composite is. And generally, I start off with telling people about a city scene or doing stars. But another use that I love to use it for is stuff like this, for shooting lightning. There's a couple of ways to go about lightning. A long exposure, which eventually will overexpose the lights from the lighthouse. The sky would eventually overexpose because there were probably 15 or 20 flashes of lightning in this image that never showed up because they were behind the clouds, but they illuminated the clouds. So long exposure would overexpose. What live composite does, this is a high ISO version of this one, so this is at like ISO 800 at f1.2. So everything I could do to start to get these lighthouses exposed properly, That was my base exposure, and I think this was like at 15 seconds is where I was at, something along those lines. And then once that base exposure was locked in, I just let it run until I got enough lightning to where I liked the look. Actually, this was the first set of lightning and the last set of lightning of that night. My wife and I stood out on the pier for about 2 hours until 3:30 in the morning to get this one shot. The alternatives, like I said, are long exposure or to constantly be hitting the shutter button, which I feel sorry for people who don't have live composite, because shooting lightning for you kind of probably has to suck a little bit. And the last two shots are going to be the same thing. More lightning. This was just Monday night. I think I drove about 150, 160 miles to shoot lightning. I met up with a couple of Olympus shooters and got these shots. What this is this actually a panorama. So this is two shots. The left half of the frame, or the left, we'll say 2/3 of the frame, are one shot. And then I panned over to the right and started another live composite rolling, and these are just stitched together. But the reason I bring this up is not so much the lightning, which to me is pretty cool, but the lightning bugs. It's funny. It's one of those things that you just kind of pick up that you don't think about. You know, when you're out there, you might take notice, wow, there's a lot of lightning bugs out tonight. But with live composite, every single time one of those little guys blinks their light, it's added to your frame. It's added to your image. So it's kind of cool to see those guys show up in the shot. And again, just one more lightning shot. You can get some weird effects with live composite. If you try live composite in certain situations like daytime with an ND filter, or at night, potentially, when the flashes of lightning light up, or during the day when the clouds are illuminated with sunlight, you end up getting what looks like the stacking of images. You can do a Google search for time stack, and it's a technique that DSLR users might get to do like a longer exposure during the day or whatever, but you can kind of run into those situations with live composite under certain conditions. Luckily for me, these flashes of lightning were so bright they kind of froze the clouds right in place and gave me, you know, the finished product. So this isn't one lightning strike. This is actually, I think there were three. So there's the main bolt here on the left that spider webs out. There's the one on the right. And then you can see up in the top of the cloud up here where I'm moving the cursor around, that's, I think, about the third one. So the entire time elapsed for this, I think, was probably about 15 minutes of spacing. And in 15 minutes, you can see the lightning bugs were pretty damn active. So that's kind of just a really quick rundown of, and let's stay on this for 1 second. So settings for something like this with the 12 to 100. I'm at ISO 400, I think, on this, if I'm not mistaken, because I wanted to get the road to be at least moderately show up, because it was pretty dark out, and I incorporated the road into the framing on purpose. I wanted not just the lightning in it, but I just kind of wanted the sense of, you know, you're driving down this country road, maybe intersecting with a storm. It's just kind of part of the little mental story that I had going on here. But in order to get the road to show up, because it was so dark, I had to start boosting ISO. I was already wide open with this lens, which is f4, and couldn't get any more light in. The lightning's only doing so much to illuminate my foreground, which is pretty much nothing because the lightning's about 60 miles away. So I had to start boosting ISO to get it to show up. So that's kind of like a quick, me talking 50 miles an hour rundown of live composite. And I just want to end talking about that with, if anybody ever has any questions, reach out to us. We love to talk about live composite.
Oh man, yeah, it's the best. And you know, and one of the things, and I know if anybody tries it, they're going to figure it out. But remember, everything that you do comes out in a raw file. So it's not one of those things where it makes a JPEG and you have that raw after, you know, or you don't get the raw. This is a real raw file. You can do some amazing things in post.
I'm glad you mentioned
really
that.
Put that. It's important to. It's just so important to me. I know when I go back, I like what I see in the camera, and I have one tonight actually in Atlanta, the same one you did. You were down below and I was up top. But it's without that post piece. The stuff you can do is fantastic.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that last shot that I shared where I wanted the road to show up, the road showed up at ISO 400. Not as bright as I wanted, but because it was a raw file, I could literally go in and push that exposure up, and I pushed it up probably another 2 stops.
Oh wow!
So you know, like you said, the fact you have a raw file, you could never probably push it that far with a JPEG without it looking like mud.
No, yeah, it'll take it into another direction.
Yeah.
For sure, for sure. So yeah, so real quick, and this will be quick. We won't stay on it long, but I am having a class, and we're trying to do something through Mirrorless Adventures where this company called, what was it called? WeWork, I think it was called
Yes.
WeWork.
Yep.
They're actually giving an actual classroom, and this is always what Jamie and I struggle with: is where do we hold these things, because you can't rent rooms. They want $200, $300, $400 an hour for some of these rooms to rent, but they're giving classrooms down inside the city of Detroit. The downside is they're not on weekends. They're during the evening, at nights, but they're actually right in the Quicken Loans building in Campus Martius. I mean, you've got whiteboards, you got huge TVs, you got beautiful chairs for everybody to sit around. I mean, these are the kind of things that we'd wish for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Outside our penthouse that we had in in Atlanta. We don't get that very often, or never.
Never.
Let's just put it that. But yeah, so that's why I want to take advantage. They're giving it to us for free that same week. So I'm doing that on August. I'm looking at my calendar down there. August 7th. It's from like 6 to 8, and if we got a chance and everybody's together there, we'll go out and shoot right there in Detroit, right at Campus Martius, and we'll try to shoot right after. But we'll talk for 2 hours and go through a lot of what you're doing right here. Go through pictures, break them down, talk about how to do them, what you're looking for, you know, and all that. And that same week, 2 days later, I'm doing a 360 one for free. Just come out and, you know, you want to know about 360. And I sent Jamie a link. If you're ever interested in purchasing one of those 360 cameras, I think they're under $300, $280, $290. But if you use a link that I put in there, you'll get a free bullet time a kit to where you can do that crazy bullet time stuff. I haven't put a lot out on that, but that's like $39. So it's worth, you know, getting it through that link and stuff. So let's see. I can try to do an image share. I'm hoping that I'll be able to get through. Yep, here it is. Okay. All right. Do you see the cracked glass?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we're going to start off at Old Car City, and we could go on for days talking about Old Car City. But I know Jamie put some stuff out last time, or we talked about doing some different things. I try to do a lot of stuff when I was there as a little bit of a project with a bunch of cracked glass, creating frames. And this is just one of those inside a car. In Old Car City, you could really spend hours on one car, let alone the 6 acres or whatever it is, 30 acres that they have there. So yeah, definitely worth your time if you ever get just outside of Atlanta in White. It's called White, Georgia. It's worth it, and I have a feeling Jamie and I will go back sometime. So yeah, there's that much to do. One of the other things we did, and you know, this is we have no people in this picture. It's not a city shot, but this is talking about those filters. Definitely, Jamie has convinced me about the filters, and I know I went crazy with them when we got out to Amicola Falls. And this is about a 10-second shot with a six stop ND filter from Nisi. With a 12-to-100 lens on the OMD EM1 Mark II. And you know what's neat about this place? I think when we pulled up, we were all worried about how high we had to go after a long day of running around. And we were able to get stuff without even going up, you know, 50 to 100 feet up into the mountains to get some of this beautiful runoff waterfalls. So yeah, that was a fun shot, and really couldn't be done in my mind without the filters, and probably Google isn't doing it any justice if you saw it live, you know, here on the computer, how much better it is. Let's jump into live composite. So this was while Jamie was down below showing the one he showed you, because he was down near the expressway. I was up above with the only hole that we could find in the fence on the bridge, shooting this one. And one of the things when I shoot a lot of live composite in the city, which is where I shoot most of mine, I don't do a whole bunch of star trails, but I get real picky about the darn streaks. In white, sometimes, you know, the front headlights of live composite can really mess things up because they get all melted together and it looks like just one big line of cars. this one I was so happy with, because not only did I get my red lights coming out of the city or going out of the city and coming through the city head on, is I actually got streaks of white. So I was real happy with this shot. And this one is, I would say I let this run, if I remember correctly, I let this run maybe only less than a minute, and it was going every 2 seconds probably was another interval on this one. So real simple, easy to do. And once you get into it, but I find one of the things I like the best about doing these, if you get a car, and this is what I was trying to avoid, is cars would be switching lanes. So then you've got all this, back and forth, and I didn't like it. I wanted straight streaks, like it was like Tron or something going through. And so you can stop it. Just stop it. You're watching it live. So just stop it if you don't like it, and start again, because you really can't control much of the traffic situation there either. So had to throw in a 360, went out to a tulip contest at a local, actually, cemetery puts on a tulip contest every year in Metro Detroit, in Troy, Michigan. And I did this tiny planet with just sticking the 360 right down inside the tulips to get this cool shot of everything, how it looked. And it's just another world, bending little tiny planet world. And I was traveling 2 weeks ago, which has pretty much been at least the last 3-4 weeks of my life. I was in New Jersey. I had some time to drive out to Liberty State Park and take in New York from the other side of the Hudson. And a reason I shared this one is I know Jamie was going to talk about live composite. This is a live composite. And I did that for a big reason. And I actually had people ask me online, why would I do this in live composite? You could just do it as long exposure. And you could, but one of the fun things about watching it on the back of the camera is I wanted certain streaks coming through the pillars there in the Hudson. And because I'm watching it on the back, I could decide when I wanted to stop it. And I was also planning all kinds of boat traffic. And let me tell you, waiting for that boat traffic to just stop and give me a window to shoot this thing, you needed live composite on there. So that's why I switched to live composite. So it's not always the streaks, that you're looking for to do that. And then the last one, this is a 3-image HDR from that Liberty State Park. It's a monument to the 9/11 victims. All the victims' names are written on the walls here of this beautiful monument. It's called Empty Sky. And Empty Sky was full of people all evening long until this exact moment. And finally, I had an opening to take it and make it happen. So we went in and took care of it that way. It was a real sharp picture. I love the lines, the drawing you in on the bottom and stuff. So yeah, a lot of fun. A lot of fun being there on the Jersey side. Seems like we're always there on the other side. So
every time I'm in Jersey, it's the airport.
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly.
Nice to see the better part of New Jersey.
I think. Yeah, exactly.
So something I wanted to talk about too, because we do, and this has been brought up several times, and it's finally being addressed here tonight. We get asked repeatedly, where can I see the photos you guys are talking about? Because we know that not everybody watches the show, and I don't blame you. It's 30 minutes you got to sit in front of a computer, whereas listening to the dulcet tones of Jamie and Mike on your commute is probably a little more convenient. But when you do want to see the images from this episode on out, swing over to the Mirrorless Minutes Facebook page, and we're creating a gallery for every show. So you can basically just look for the gallery for episode number 97, which I just set up just now while Mike was doing his image share. And once I get the images from Mike, I'll put his over there as well. So it'll be a spot where you can go back and at least see what we're talking about. Because while it's cool to kind of hear about the process, or the tools, techniques, what have you, it's always good to at least be able to see them, and, there it is. So we got galleries now. We're doing that. We're stepping up a little bit.
I forgot to say the lens too. John Thomas just reminded me. It was 12 to 100 actually on every single one of those shots except for the Insta 360.
It's funny. I almost get embarrassed talking about if I look at my shots lately, like every time I do a share, like on Instagram, it's like 12 to 100, 12 to 100, 12 to 100. I'm like, man, I got other lenses in the bag.
Yeah.
The shelf is full of them. It's like
I know.
12 to 100. So I guess it's testament to how good that lens is.
Yeah, exactly.
We're at the half-hour mark, folks.
Yeah, we are.
Mike's on vacation. Or, I'm sorry, Mike's working in California. Should probably never give the illusion that it's vacation because I know it's tough traveling. So we'll give Mike a break for the night. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. On the next episode, you're not even going to believe what it's going to be about. I have no idea. Hopefully, I've got a title for it other than the one that I used this week. So with that said, we see you guys in a couple of weeks. Hopefully we see a bunch of you here in Michigan at the meetup on Saturday. And I'll tell you what, rain or shine, we're doing it. So we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. Take care.
All right. See you, everybody.